Rain hammered the glass walls of our Seattle condo the night everything changed. Dylan Cross, my husband, slept soundly beside me after his Thursday tennis game and 2 whiskeys. But his phone betrayed him. It lit up on the dresser like a spotlight in a dark theater. Just one line was enough to unravel 11 years together. Can't wait for the weekend, the cabin, the wine, and that pink lace set. The sender, Lena Ortiz. I didn't gasp. I didn't scream. I simply unlocked the phone with Dylan's finger and began scrolling. For a marketing director like me, deception was nothing new. I'd built entire campaigns out of illusions, but this wasn't branding. This was my life. Hidden beneath his business trips were receipts, photos, and messages stretching back months. And Lena wasn't just anyone. She was married to Evan Ortiz, an architect. By sunrise, I had drafted a message to Evan. Within hours, his voice trembled through the phone. "What do you want to do?" I already knew. We would stage the truth like a product launch. And when Dylan and Lena walked into that cabin, they would see us waiting, with wine, 4 glasses, and an envelope of evidence. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Seattle had always been a city of reinvention. Glass towers reflected clouds 1 minute, then vanished into fog the next. I used to think my life mirrored that skyline, steady, ambitious, impressive on the outside, but shifting behind the surface. I wasn't born into glossy boardrooms or rooftop cocktail hours. My childhood was a string of apartment moves, half-finished schools, and late-night dinners made from whatever was cheapest at the corner store. My mother was the practical one, patching jeans and clipping coupons. My father was the dreamer, chasing one business scheme after another, always with promises that next time will be different. It never was. When he walked out for good, leaving nothing but a stack of unpaid bills and a faded jacket, I promised myself I would never live on someone else's broken promises again. That vow became my fuel. I clawed my way into the University of Washington's marketing program on scholarships and part-time jobs. I wasn't the smartest in every class, but I was the hungriest. While others obsessed over theory, I studied people. What made them want? What made them believe? How a single image or phrase could shift perception and rewrite a story. By the time I was 27, I was leading campaigns for a lifestyle brand that sold aspiration more than product. I learned to package imperfection as luxury, to dress chaos in clean typography, to turn cracks into character. Clients loved me because I could take the ugliest truth and make it look polished. But in private, I wondered if all I was doing was building castles out of smoke. It was during one of those endless late-night strategy sessions that Dylan walked into my life. He wasn't just charming. He was steady, or so I thought. While I burned myself out crafting perfect pitches, he brought coffee, rubbed my shoulders, and told me I was brilliant. He was the first person who made me feel like I didn't have to hustle alone. We married 6 years later, and for a time, I believed I had finally rewritten the story of my past. But the cracks started quietly. Dylan's job required travel, or so he said. I told myself it was normal, that every couple has seasons of distance. But little signs began to pile up like stubborn stains you can't scrub out. The way he guarded his phone, the sudden business trips to Portland, the hollow excuses about late meetings. His smile remained the same, but his eyes had shifted. They no longer lingered on me. Still, I clung to the illusion. After all, wasn't I an expert at illusions? I marketed happiness to millions. Surely I could market it to myself. Every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of my parents' collapse. I refused to believe I had chosen wrong, refused to admit that I had built my life on another unreliable foundation. But illusions are fragile. They shatter with the lightest touch. For me, it was a single notification glowing in the dark. Lena Ortiz. A name I didn't know, but a truth I instantly recognized. That night, as Dylan slept, I unlocked his phone. I told myself I just needed to confirm what I already suspected, but what I found was more than confirmation. It was betrayal in high definition. Lena wasn't a fling, she was someone's wife. Evan Ortiz, an architect, a man who had no idea he was being made into a fool just like me. The irony hit me hard. All those years of polishing brands, of staging truths to make them palatable. And here I was, confronted with a raw truth that couldn't be rebranded. My marriage wasn't a story of endurance or loyalty. It was a campaign that had expired, and Dylan had already launched a new one with someone else. But I wasn't the same girl who once lived off canned soup and hand-me-down coats. I had survived too much to crumble now. If Dylan wanted to write me out of his story, I would write my own ending. One stage so precisely, so powerfully, that neither he nor Lena could ever forget it. And so, the marketer in me began her most important campaign yet, the campaign for truth. I would take the raw, ugly betrayal and package it so neatly that it would expose itself. No screaming, no chaos. Just a stage, 4 glasses, and an envelope of evidence that would speak louder than any slogan I had ever written. By the time most of Seattle was still nursing its first cup of coffee, I was already 2 hours into my day. Mornings had become my stage, a routine performance polished by years of discipline. Crisp blazer, tailored slacks, a flash of red lipstick, the armor of someone who had spent her life turning flaws into features. As marketing director for a global lifestyle brand, I was the architect of desire. My job wasn't about selling furniture, clothes, or accessories. It was about selling what people wanted to believe about themselves. I had mastered the choreography, headline that tugged at the heart, image that lingered in the mind, slogan that etched itself into memory. My colleagues often whispered words like visionary and untouchable behind my back. In boardrooms, I knew how to command silence with a glance, then ignite energy with a single slide. At client dinners, I could raise a glass and make investors believe they were part of something historic. To outsiders, I was the woman who had it all: the career, the husband, the downtown condo with skyline views. And maybe for a while, I believed it too. Dylan and I played our parts well. At company parties, he slipped an arm around my waist and kissed me in front of cameras. At charity galas, we posed as the perfect couple, him in his sharp navy suits, me in gowns that shimmered under chandelier light. We were the Quinn brand, flawless from the outside, but perfection has a shelf life. Behind the polished smiles, our conversations had grown thin. Nights once spent laughing over wine turned into silent dinners, the clink of cutlery filling the void. Dylan's phone became his most loyal companion, always buzzing, always face down. When I leaned in to ask about his day, his answers came short, clipped, as if I were interrupting something more important. I told myself it was stress, that maybe he felt overshadowed by my career. After all, not every man liked being married to a woman who negotiated million-dollar deals and graced magazine spreads as the power face of marketing. I softened my voice. I cooked his favorite meals. I tried to remind him of us, but his attention was already elsewhere. Still, in public, I kept the act intact. In meetings, no one could tell that my heart ached while I pitched campaigns. At launches, no one saw the flicker of doubt when Dylan failed to show up because of a last-minute trip. Even when colleagues teased that I was married to my job, I smiled. Better to be seen as ambitious than abandoned. Success, I realized, is a double-edged sword. The very confidence that made me unstoppable in business blinded me in marriage. I thought I could rebrand our problems, cover cracks with glossy slogans, but life doesn't follow campaigns. It exposes mercilessly what you try to hide. And then came that night. The rain, the glow of his phone, the text that stripped away the last layer of illusion. Suddenly, every gala photo, every staged smile, every carefully curated moment of success collapsed into irony. I had spent a career selling perfection, only to come home to a marriage built on betrayal. That's when the strategist in me awoke again, not to sell, but to expose. To take the stage one last time, not for an audience of thousands, but for two liars who thought their performance could go on forever. This wouldn't be chaos. It would be a campaign, and I would execute it flawlessly. The plan wasn't about revenge, it was about exposure. Dylan thought he was writing the narrative, the loving husband with work obligations and secret weekends away. Lena thought she was playing the role of the irresistible escape, but I was a marketer. I knew better than anyone that the story only matters if you control the ending. Saturday morning, Evan and I met again, this time at a small coffee shop in Ellensburg, the kind of halfway point people usually pass through without stopping. We didn't exchange pleasantries. We didn't talk about the weather. Instead, I slid my phone across the table, screen lit with Dylan and Lena's conversations, their laughter, their lies, their meticulous planning. Evan scrolled in silence, his jaw tightened with each swipe, his hand flexing against the ceramic mug as though it was the only thing tethering him to the earth. When he reached a photo Lena had sent, bare toes on a hardwood floor, he closed his eyes. "That's my design," he muttered. I drew every line of that cabin. The pain in his voice wasn't anger, it was recognition. Recognition that something sacred to him had been defiled. He looked up at me, and for the first time since we met, our eyes carried the same fire. Not rage, not grief, clarity. "We get there before them," he said. "She doesn't know I still have a key. We'll make it simple. No yelling, no chasing, just truth." For the next day and a half, I felt like I was planning a product launch. That was the only way my mind knew how to handle it. I mapped it out step by step. Arrival time, staging, lighting, props. Not props, I corrected myself. Evidence, receipts, screenshots, photos. I gathered everything into a thick envelope. Each page, another nail in the coffin of Dylan's lies. By Sunday morning, I drove east through mountain passes, the highway slicing through pine-covered hills. The air thinned, the sky widened, and with every mile, the weight on my chest loosened just enough for me to breathe. When I pulled up to the Silver Pine cabin, Evan's silver SUV was already there. He stood on the porch, coffee in hand, his tall frame silhouetted against the lake behind him. The cabin was beautiful, just as Dylan once promised he'd bring me here. A promise he never fulfilled. Of course not. He had fulfilled it with someone else. Inside, we worked quietly. Evan lit the fireplace, its low crackle filling the silence. I wiped the long wooden table, arranging 4 crystal glasses beside a bottle of red wine, Lena's favorite, according to her messages. The room was warm, almost inviting. That was the point. Let them walk in expecting intimacy, only to find us waiting. Evan placed chairs so they faced us directly. "I want her to see me first," he said. His voice carried no tremor, only certainty. I adjusted the lamp until the light cast a soft amber glow across the table. Not harsh, not theatrical, but just enough to capture every flicker of expression. In marketing, you learn that lighting changes everything. Tonight, it would reveal, not conceal. "How do you think they'll react?" I asked. "Lena will cry," he said without hesitation. "She always cries when cornered. Dylan." He paused. "Dylan will probably try to argue, to reframe. He's not ready for the fact that both of us know." I nodded. "Then we won't argue. We'll just show them the mirror." We rehearsed nothing more. There was no script, only presence. Hours slipped by in quiet conversation, not of betrayal, but of survival. I told Evan how Dylan used to skip family dinners for emergencies, how I'd brushed off Uber receipts from neighborhoods far from his office. Evan told me about nights Lena smiled at her phone, hiding the screen the moment he walked in. The clock crept toward 6. The lake outside was still, reflecting the pale gray sky like a sheet of glass. My heartbeat synced with the tick of the cabin's wall clock. Then we heard it. Tires on gravel, a car door shutting, laughter drifting up the path. Evan and I exchanged a look. No words, just a silent acknowledgement that the curtain was about to rise. The door opened. Lena stepped in first, bouquet of tulips in hand, her smile freezing in midair. Dylan bumped into her back, still chuckling until he saw me. The gift bag in his hand dropped, a bottle of champagne rolling across the floor and shattering into glass and fizz. "Welcome to your weekend getaway," I said evenly, my voice as smooth as a pitch. "We've prepared wine, chairs, and the truth." Dylan's face drained of color. "Mara, this isn't—" But I raised a hand, stopping him. "No slogans tonight, Dylan. No excuses. Just facts." Evan rose from his chair, his gaze locked on Lena. "And what about me, Lena? You said you were in Spokane with a coworker. You even texted me goodnight. Was I just another audience to keep entertained while you rehearsed your other life?" Lena's eyes filled with tears. The tulips slipped from her hand, petals scattering across the floor like pieces of a script torn apart. For the first time in months, I felt calm. This was the campaign of my life, and the launch was flawless. The air in the cabin thickened the moment the champagne bottles shattered. The hiss of escaping bubbles filled the silence like a cruel applause. Dylan bent down instinctively, reaching for the shards, but his hand froze when I spoke again. "Don't bother cleaning it up," I said. "It's the perfect metaphor." Evan remained seated, his body still but his jaw tight. Lena shifted uneasily, tulips abandoned at her feet, her eyes darting between him and me as if searching for an escape route. But there was none, not tonight. Dylan straightened, his face composed into that familiar, charming mask he had used on investors. On me, on anyone who needed to believe in him. "Mara, listen, you've misunderstood." "Misunderstood?" My voice cut through the room like a blade. I reached for the envelope on the table and slid it toward him. Receipts, screenshots, Uber logs. Do you need me to explain them? Or can you read on your own? His lips tightened, but he didn't open the envelope. Instead, he turned toward Lena. "This isn't how it looks," he said quickly, as though she might still be his ally. But Evan stood then, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. "Don't," he said, his voice low but heavy with warning. "Don't even try to make her your audience." Lena's hands trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Evan, please." "Please what?" His eyes were sharp, his voice steady. "Please forget that I designed this cabin? That I worked nights and weekends to build us a future while you were busy filling it with someone else?" She sank into the nearest chair, her body folding in on itself. I almost pitied her. Almost. Dylan, however, wasn't folding. He paced, running a hand through his hair, his voice rising with desperation. "You've been spying on me, Mara. That's what this is. You went through my phone, my accounts. That's an invasion of privacy." I laughed softly. "Privacy? You mean the kind you sacrificed when you left your phone on the dresser glowing like a neon sign? Or when you carried on an affair in a cabin paid for by my salary? Don't talk to me about privacy. Talk to me about honesty, about loyalty." He flinched, just slightly, then masked it with anger. "I made mistakes, yes, but it doesn't mean I stopped loving you." "Love?" I tilted my head, studying him like I would a client pitching a bad campaign. "If your version of love includes another woman in the same cabin where you once promised to bring me, then your definition is as empty as your promises." Evan crossed the room, his steps deliberate. He didn't look at Dylan, but at Lena, who sat sobbing quietly. "How long?" he asked. She lifted her head, mascara streaking her cheeks. Her lips trembled, then formed the words that cracked the room open. 7 months. The number landed like a thunderclap. Evan closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, then turned away as though the sight of her was too much. Dylan froze, realizing the timeline was longer, deeper, more intentional than he had expected to admit. 7 months, I repeated softly, letting the weight of it sink in. 7 months of lies, 7 months of excuses, 7 months of me cooking dinners alone while you sent her tulips and wine receipts. Dylan's hands clenched. "I can explain." "Don't bother," I interrupted. "This isn't a focus group, Dylan. You don't get to spin this." Evan spoke again, his voice quieter now, but no less sharp. "You could have told me, Lena. You could have said the marriage wasn't working, that you wanted out. But instead, you chose deceit." He shook his head slowly. "Do you know what hurts most? It's not that you cheated. It's that you didn't think I deserved the truth." Lena sobbed harder, clutching the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. For a while, silence reigned. The only sound was the steady ticking of the wooden clock and the faint crackle of the fireplace. I looked at Dylan and Lena, 2 people who had built a world out of shadows, now forced to stand in the harsh light of reality. But then Lena lifted her head, her eyes bloodshot, her voice trembling but steady enough to pierce the stillness. "There's something else." Evan froze. I narrowed my eyes. Dylan glanced at her with a frown. She swallowed hard, her hands tightening around her lap. "I'm pregnant!" The word detonated in the room. Pregnant. It echoed in the silence, heavier than any accusation. Dylan's head snapped toward her. "What?" Lena nodded slowly, her tears catching in the firelight. "I found out last week. I was going to tell you here, this weekend." Evan stood frozen, his face pale, his fists clenched at his sides. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Is it mine?" Lena's eyes darted to Dylan, then back to Evan. "Yes," she whispered. "It's yours." Dylan and we always used protection. For a moment, time stopped. Dylan staggered back as though she had slapped him. His jaw dropped, eyes wide with disbelief. You told me. But she shook her head firmly. It was never about a future with you. It was about escaping, about feeling alive. The words sliced through him. For the first time that night, Dylan's mask crumbled. He looked small, hollow, undone. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The truth had unfolded, not through screaming, but through confession. The very thing I had planned had happened. The story had written itself in the light of exposure. I stood, walked to my bag, and pulled out another folder. Thinner, but heavier in meaning. I laid it on the table, sliding it toward Dylan. These are divorce papers, signed by me. Assets already separated, accounts secured. You can fight it if you want, but you'll only lose more. His eyes met mine, red with fury and desperation. Mara, please! We had good years! Don't throw it all away because of... Because of what? I interrupted coldly. Because of months of betrayal? Because of nights I spent alone while you were here with her? No, Dylan. I'm not throwing anything away. You did that yourself. I'm just closing the campaign. Evan turned to Lena, his voice steadier now. If you're keeping the baby, I'll take responsibility. But this marriage, I don't know yet. His words were measured, but final in tone. Lena collapsed into sobs again, whispering apologies no one asked for. I looked at Dylan one last time. You don't love me, Dylan. You love the reflection of yourself in other people's eyes, but reflections fade. And tonight, so did mine. The room went still again, heavy with everything exposed. For the first time in years, I felt no need to sell, no need to spin. The truth was enough. And for me, that was all that mattered. Long before I ever set foot inside the cabin, I had already built my case. Not because I craved revenge, but because I understood one thing better than most. Narratives are only as powerful as the evidence behind them. In marketing, I'd spent years convincing people with curated stories. But this wasn't a pitch to clients. This was the story of my life, and I wasn't going to let Dylan rewrite it with half-truths. The night I unlocked his phone, I forced myself not to react emotionally. My heart wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him awake and demand answers. Instead, I acted like a strategist. I screenshotted everything: dates, times, nicknames, emojis. I saved the Uber receipts tucked in his email, cross-referenced them with his Portland meetings. Every inconsistency became another bullet point in my invisible campaign brief. Over the next few days, I pulled threads carefully. I logged into our joint credit card statements, scanning for charges that didn't fit. Dylan was careless. He thought hiding behind business trips would keep me blind. But he underestimated me. One line item was a wine shop in Tacoma. Another, a boutique hotel 2 hours away. Both matched the timeline of Lena's messages. I printed each statement and slid them into a manila folder. Not chaotic, not jumbled. Neat, organized, tabbed like the pitch decks I used to present at boardrooms. If Dylan wanted to argue, I'd have a counterslide for every excuse. Next came the visual layer. In my field, people don't just believe words. They believe images. I scrolled through photo attachments Lena had sent him. The cabin floor, tulips on the counter, a wine glass lifted against a sunset. I saved each one, then matched them to Instagram posts tagged at Silver Pine Lake. Same flooring, same view, same cabin. The evidence was irrefutable, but I didn't stop there. In marketing, you prepare redundancies. If one channel fails, another carries the message. I called Dylan's assistant, pretending I needed to verify his travel schedule. With the casualness of someone unaware, she confirmed he had no business trips booked in Portland. I recorded the call, saving the file to a secure drive. His own workplace had unknowingly become my witness. At night, while Dylan slept beside me, I worked quietly at my desk, headphones in, printer humming. My apartment became a war room. Stacks of paper turned into exhibits. I labeled each section: messages, photos, receipts, audio, timeline. Every page was numbered, highlighted, and clipped together. This wasn't paranoia. This was strategy. When I finally reached out to Evan, I wasn't just offering suspicion. I was offering proof. That's why he believed me so quickly. He wasn't hearing the ramblings of a paranoid wife. He was seeing the data, the evidence, the story laid bare in cold ink and pixels. Still, part of me wanted to understand why. Why Lena? Why risk everything we built for someone else's wife? So I started digging into her too. LinkedIn showed her role as a sales rep for a medical device company, married for over a decade, a husband with his own architecture firm. I wondered if she ever felt the same emptiness I had, staring across a table at a partner who no longer looked at her. Maybe. But pain doesn't excuse betrayal. The deeper I went, the more it felt like I was preparing for a campaign launch. Each time I clipped a page, I imagined unveiling it in a boardroom. Each piece of evidence was a slide. And Dylan was the client who thought he could lie his way out. But not this time. This time, the story was mine. I even thought through the staging. Lighting changes perception. I knew that from years of photo shoots. So when Evan suggested we prepare the cabin, I thought of it less as a trap and more as a stage. The wine on the table wasn't decoration. It was bait. A symbol of intimacy turned hollow. The 4 crystal glasses weren't hospitality. They were confrontation, symmetry in glass. 2 couples, 2 stories, colliding into one truth. As I packed my bag that morning, folders, printed transcripts, a voice recorder, even spare pens, I felt strangely calm. People imagine betrayal sends you into chaos, but for me, clarity came with structure. Each document was another brick in the wall between who I had been and who I was becoming. On the drive out, I rehearsed lines in my head. Not accusations, but questions. In marketing, questions are powerful because they force the audience to respond. How long has this been going on? Where were you really? Do you know how much I've carried while you hid behind lies? I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I would let silence and evidence do the work. I thought about the years Dylan and I had spent building our image, the charity galas, the photographs in glossy magazines, the holiday cards sent to colleagues. We had branded ourselves as the power couple. But all of it had been marketing copy. Surface shine covering cracks, and I, the supposed expert, had fallen for it. That realization stung more than the betrayal itself. By the time I arrived at the cabin, the manila folders stacked neatly in my leather bag, I knew there was no turning back. This wasn't just about exposing Dylan and Lena. It was about reclaiming control of the story. For too long, I had let other people write the narrative of my life. My father, with his broken promises. Dylan, with his wandering eyes. Not anymore. When Evan looked at me that morning and asked, "Are you sure about this?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely," I said, because I wasn't just collecting evidence for confrontation. I was collecting evidence for my freedom. And when Dylan and Lena finally walked into that cabin, their laughter still fresh, they didn't just face two betrayed spouses. They faced the truth, dressed in the sharp clarity of evidence, ready to strip away every illusion they had built. For the first time in years, I felt steady. Not as a wife trying to save a marriage, but as a woman ready to unveil the final campaign of a life she no longer owed to someone else's lies. After the confrontation in the cabin, silence lingered like smoke after a fire. Dylan sat rigid in his chair, the divorce papers spread across the table like broken glass. Lena sobbed quietly in the corner, one hand on her stomach. While Evan stared out the window at the still surface of Silver Pine Lake. But my mind wasn't still. It was moving quickly, calculating, strategizing. In marketing, a launch didn't end when the product hit the shelves. It began. This was no different. The confrontation had exposed the lies, but exposure was only phase 1. The retaliation plan was phase 2. Evan turned back to me, his face pale but steady. "What happens now?" he asked. I leaned back, folding my arms. "We take control of the narrative. If we don't, they'll try to spin it. They'll claim it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, maybe even blame us. No, we decide how this ends." Dylan scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "What are you talking about? You can't—" "Yes, I can," I cut in, my voice sharp. "I've spent a career shaping stories people believe, and this time, I'm shaping mine. You don't get to own the ending, Dylan. I do." I pulled a second folder from my bag. Inside weren't receipts or screenshots. Those had already served their purpose. This folder held outlines, drafts, and plans I had written in sleepless nights leading up to the cabin showdown. The marketer in me had gone into overdrive, designing not just exposure, but fallout. Phase 1, confrontation. Phase 2, documentation. Phase 3, retaliation. I slid the papers toward Evan. "This isn't just about divorce papers," I explained. "This is about ensuring they don't recover easily. Not because I want them ruined, but because I want them accountable." Evan scanned the outlines. His brows furrowed as he read through the steps. Financial safeguards, legal filings, professional disclosures. He looked up at me. "You've thought of everything." "I had to," I said quietly. "I couldn't afford not to." Evan nodded slowly. "Then let's do it." Dylan's voice rose, sharp with panic. "You can't drag me through the mud like some PR scandal. My firm—" "Your firm," I interrupted, "already knows more than you think. Do you really believe assistants keep secrets forever? Do you think missed deadlines, mysterious trips, and expense reports don't raise eyebrows? I don't have to drag you anywhere, Dylan. You've already walked yourself there." His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he had no clever rebuttal. The first part of my retaliation plan had already been set in motion before the cabin. The divorce petition wasn't just paperwork. It was a message to the courts, the banks, and our mutual circles that I wasn't blindsided. I was prepared. I had transferred assets into separate accounts, legally documented every move, and ensured my name was clean of his debts. The second part would come with silence. Strategic silence. No screaming matches, no public meltdowns. Instead, carefully chosen words whispered in the right places. Colleagues who asked where Dylan was on weekends would hear, gently, that he had other priorities. Mutual friends would see me composed, not broken. In time, his reputation would unravel without me lifting a finger. People trusted composed truth over chaotic denial. The third part was personal. and Evan would carry it out with me. Lena's pregnancy complicated things, but it didn't absolve her. Evan planned to file for separation, ensuring child custody and financial support were structured clearly. He refused to let her drift between two lives anymore. Together, we decided we wouldn't explode the affair into the open with fireworks. That would only make us look bitter. Instead, we would control the leak of truth like professionals manage a brand crisis. Steady, precise, irrefutable. Let Dylan and Lena scramble while we stayed composed. That night, after Evan left the cabin to clear his head, I sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. The retaliation plan wasn't born out of anger. It was born out of clarity. For too long, Dylan had counted on me to be forgiving, pliant, easy to deceive. But now, I wasn't reacting as his wife. I was acting as myself, as a strategist. I thought about my parents, my father with his empty promises, my mother patching together what was left. I had inherited both their traits, his ability to dream, her ability to endure. But I was done enduring. My retaliation plan was more than an answer to betrayal. It was my refusal to live in the shadows of lies any longer. When Dylan tried again to speak, his voice lower, almost pleading, I looked him in the eye. This isn't revenge, Dylan. This is closure. And closure isn't given, it's created. The words seemed to pierce him deeper than anger ever could. His shoulders slumped. His eyes dropped to the floor. For the first time in years, I felt taller, stronger, untouchable. The retaliation plan was in motion, and for once, I wasn't selling an illusion. I was delivering the truth. The confrontation at the cabin had broken the illusion between the four of us. But the world outside still believed in the fantasy Dylan and I had built. The perfect couple, the polished brand. That was about to change. 2 weeks later, our company hosted its annual gala. A night of champagne toasts, investors in tuxedos, and glossy photographs splashed across magazines the next morning. Dylan loved those nights. He thrived on the spotlight, on shaking hands with men in tailored suits and kissing cheeks of women in glittering gowns. He counted on me to stand by his side, smile fixed, laughter timed. Together, we were Mara and Dylan Cross, the brand, not the marriage. But this time, I wasn't there to uphold the image. I was there to dismantle it. I arrived in a simple black gown, understated but deliberate. My hair swept back, my eyes calm. I wasn't the wife begging for scraps of attention. I was the strategist unveiling the truth. Dylan didn't notice me at first. He was too busy holding court near the bar, telling some story, his hand gesturing as if he were still the man everyone believed him to be. When his eyes finally met mine across the room, I saw the flicker, panic disguised as surprise. He walked toward me quickly, voice low but urgent. Mara, you shouldn't be here. Not like this. I smiled faintly. Relax. I'm not here to make a scene. But of course, the best scenes are the ones you don't announce. When the CEO tapped her glass for attention and the crowd hushed, Dylan expected the usual. A toast, a polished speech, applause. Instead, the microphone passed to me. My title as marketing director gave me that platform, and I took it without hesitation. I began with warmth, thanking the team, the investors, the clients. I painted the picture of resilience in a challenging year, of creativity pushing boundaries. But then my voice shifted, softer, steadier. Marketing is about truth, I said. Not the surface level kind, but the truth that resonates, the truth people feel even when they don't want to admit it. And sometimes, even in our personal lives, we have to confront uncomfortable truths. A ripple moved through the room. Dylan stiffened, his face pale. I didn't name him. I didn't have to. Every carefully chosen word was a scalpel, cutting away the glossy veneer. I spoke about integrity, about the danger of selling an image that doesn't match reality, about how illusions collapse under their own weight. I watched as colleagues exchanged glances. Some nodded, understanding more than I said aloud. Investors shifted uneasily, sensing the undertone. Dylan's charm was unraveling without me needing to expose a single detail. The campaign was working. When I finished, the room erupted in applause, not thunderous, but respectful. A recognition that something real had just been said in a place usually drowned in performance. Dylan tried to approach me afterward, his smile tight, his words clipped. You've humiliated me. I tilted my head. No, I've reminded people that truth matters more than image. If you feel humiliated, that's because you've been living off an image that was never real. He had no answer. The applause still lingered in the air. Evan texted me later that night. Saw the coverage. That was brilliant. You didn't even have to name them, and yet everyone knows. I smiled at the screen, the weight on my chest finally lifting. The public climax wasn't fireworks or shouting. It was precision. A campaign of truth launched flawlessly, leaving Dylan and Lena exposed not by my anger, but by their own shadows. And for the first time in years, I walked away from a gala not as someone's wife, not as half of a brand, but as Mara Quinn, a woman who owned her story. Fallout doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in quietly, then crashes like a wave. For Dylan, it started with whispers. After the gala, colleagues noticed his absence from meetings, his sudden defensiveness in conversations. Executives didn't confront him directly, but his invitations to big projects slowed, then stopped. One day, he was the man being groomed for partnership. The next, he was reassigned to manage Team B on a temporary basis. No one said why. They didn't have to. The firm prided itself on image, and Dylan's image had cracked. Socially, our circle fractured. Friends who once admired our perfect marriage avoided taking sides, but silence was louder than words. At dinner parties, I was welcomed warmly, asked about work, complimented on my composure. Dylan, when he showed up at all, found conversations cut short, eyes sliding away. The brand he built with me had collapsed without me beside him. Lena's consequences were different. Her pregnancy meant she couldn't vanish into denial. Evan filed for separation, but promised to support the child. He was calm, practical, steady, the kind of man who kept his promises, even when they cost him. Lena had no such steadiness. She confessed to mutual friends, her tears endless, her apologies constant. But apologies didn't rebuild trust. She was left navigating motherhood with the weight of her choices pressing down harder than any judgment from others. As for me, the divorce finalized faster than I imagined. My preparation, the evidence, the financial safeguards, the legal filings, left Dylan no room to fight. He signed quickly, perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of exhaustion. The condo became mine. The accounts became mine. More importantly, my freedom became mine. I sold the Silva Pine cabin back to Dylan, not out of spite, but because I didn't want to live in a place haunted by broken promises. Let him keep it. Let it remind him of what he lost. In the weeks that followed, I felt lighter. Every morning, I woke without dread, without suspicion. I wasn't someone's brand anymore. I wasn't a prop in a story that didn't belong to me. Dylan faced consequences in silence. Lena carried hers in her womb. Evan carried his with dignity. And me? I carried nothing but clarity. The truth had finally become the loudest voice in the room. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a small beach house in Port Townsend, the Pacific wind brushing against my face. The city lights of Seattle were far behind me now, replaced by the steady rhythm of waves. My mornings no longer began with Dylan's rushed excuses or the glow of his phone. They began with tea, silence, and the knowledge that my life belonged entirely to me. Dylan crossed my path once more at a charity event. He looked smaller, thinner, his smile tentative. "You look well," he said. I smiled back, not with bitterness, but with distance. "I am well," I replied, and I meant it. Evan still texted occasionally, not out of longing, but solidarity. "Nora took her first steps," he wrote one evening. I congratulated him, happy to see him find healing in fatherhood. Our bond wasn't romance, it was resilience. Two survivors who had walked through fire and come out stronger. As for me, I no longer chased illusions. I built truth. And every sunrise on that coastline reminded me, sometimes the most powerful campaign you'll ever launch is the one for your own freedom. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share where you're listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive.